This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
I want to start just by, like I usually do when I have somebody on, is tell me who you are, how you found the Wheel of Time, and how you found Watt Spoilers.
Yeah, so my name's Jackson. I live in Colorado. I started reading the Wheel of Time back in the 90s. I don't remember what year because it was so long ago, but do
you remember what book was out?
Lord of Chaos was the most recent release. So it was like 94, 95, somewhere in there.
Yep, that's the right time.
I was like 14 or 15. So, and my friends at school had read it and they badgered me to read it. And I kind of started Eye of the World and I was like, oh man, this is crap. What are you guys talking about? And I never even made it to Shadow Logoth. And then, they kept bugging me and I tried again. And I don't know, maybe like my fourth time, I finally made it past Shadow Logoth. And then I was hooked.
It needs a slow start to get past a little bit.
The thing I always remember is I kept asking, I had several friends that had read it, and I kept asking them, when does Rand get to the White Tower? And of course they kept telling me Raffo. And
And it turns out he did eventually get there.
He did, finally.
Took about 30 years.
Exactly, yeah. So I was a whole different person myself by the time he got there. But
oh, yeah, totally. No, and that sounds like we're the same age and started reading it almost exactly the same time. So, we have sort of a similar trajectory on the history because I think I was, right around Lord of Chaos, right around 95, right when I was about 14. All those things are true for me as well.
Yeah. So, and then, about book 3 or so, I just got so into it that I disappeared, and all my friends and family were like, where did you go? What happened to you?
Westlands, Randland.
Yep. And then I went through Lord of Chaos, read Do Might as Well. So it's kind of appropriate that I'm guesting on Lord of Chaos. And then I had to wait. So then all I did was reread it over and over until the next book came out.
No, that sounds about right. And then every time the new book came out, I guess you reread the whole series?
Indeed. Yep.
Indeed.
And I've done probably 3 full series rereads after A Memory of Light now, maybe 4. But I've never done the audiobooks, and I'm so, after the panel with Kate and Michael on SpoilerCon there, I'm so excited to do a audio reread now.
Oh, good, yeah, because aren't they wonderful?
They are, and I've listened to Stormlight Archive, so I do know them, but I just haven't done Wheel of Time that way yet.
Yeah, you'll have a little trouble adjusting because you'll be like, wait, is that Adeline? No, okay, wait, no, that's Rand.
I figured. Gotcha. Speaking of which, are you drinking something tonight?
I am not, actually. I didn't go to the store and buy anything. I do have some whiskey on me, but I drank some of that last night, so I think I'm going to pass today.
Yeah.
Like I said, I got so much shit to do from SpoilerCon. I am. It's not that I don't want to drink. It's just that I don't want to be hungover at all.
You got to skip the drinking. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was gonna go out and get a cool Colorado beer since you guys are always representing the Northwest beers, but I didn't have time, so I'm drinking some whiskey actually.
Oh, well, maybe you know what? Hold on. I'm gonna go get some whiskey too. Then, if you're drinking whiskey, I'm gonna drink some whiskey. Be right back.
I'm not very good at monologuing, y'all, so I'm going to wait for him to come back.
Okay, and I'm back. What kind of whiskey are you drinking?
I am drinking Woodford Reserve. It's a bourbon.
On the rocks?
Nope, straight. Or neat. Yeah, I usually don't do on the rocks unless it's a cheap whiskey.
See, I am definitely an on the rocks kind of guy. I feel like the water opens up the flavor a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you at the beginning, but then it melts, and then it's kind of this water-whiskey mix.
How long you letting your whiskey sit around?
I don't drink very much, so I guess that's a problem.
Yeah. That's a good point, then. Yeah, no, I'm drinking some Bullet whiskey.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I like that.
Which is sort of a, not super high class, but it's that nice, I spent a little bit of money on my whiskey. I can drink it neat without mixing, but I'm not breaking the bank to buy it. So it's just in a good middle spot for me.
Yeah, that's typically what I drink too, is something like that. But actually, they had a sale on this Woodford Reserve, so I'm enjoying that one right now.
Nice.
So you ready to jump in?
Sure, let's jump into chapter 23, To Understand a Message. And our symbol is our four-clover snake, our forsaken snake. Which I suppose is fairly obvious for this chapter.
Yeah, I mean, basically very straightforward.
This is a meeting between Graendal and Sammael, just like in the prologue. Yeah, I was just going to say it's Graendal and Forsaken, and I guess the message is the message that Sammael is sending to Graendal, or vice versa. Not really sure. I'd like to dig into that one as we get into it a little bit.
I mean, I think it's the message that Sammael was getting from Rand, kind of from himself from Rand, from the messenger.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I guess the understanding is that Rand said no truce, and that was his message.
Right, but it's like, okay, is he really understanding it? So we'll get into that.
Graendal managed not to stare as she entered the room, but her streath gown went dead black before she could control herself and return it to a blue mist. Sammael had done enough to make anyone doubt that this chamber was in the great hall of the council in Ilion, but then she would be very surprised if anyone but he ever penetrated this far uninvited into Lord Bren's apartments. The air was pleasantly cool. In one corner rose the hollow cylinder of an exchanger. Glow bulbs, bright and steady, stood oddly in the heavy gold candle holders, giving much better illumination than candles or oil lamps ever could. A small music box sat on the marble mantelpiece, producing from its memory the soft strains of a sound sculpture that very likely had not been heard outside this room in well over 3,000 years. And she recognized several of the artworks on the walls. I think that's where I'll stop. Doing a shorter read-ins than Patrick, but there's so much in these paragraphs that I don't want to go too far.
Indeed, yeah. I'm like chomping at the bit here to talk about some of the things you just read. Back to the title, I mean, to me, I was thinking about this, and I thought it's about the message that Sammael was supposed to be getting back from Rand, and what kind of like the to understand part is kind of confusing. Like, does Sammael actually understand the message or not? And is that because the whole tone of this chapter is completely different than the last time Sammael and Graendal came together.
Right, because last time she was very confident she was manipulating him, and now it seems like he's manipulating her.
Very much so. And it's kind of confusing to me, actually. I read over the chapter a couple of times, and I'm not really sure exactly what's going on there.
I will admit, this is one of those points where I don't know enough. I think I've said this before, but Sammael is a bit of a enigma to me. I don't understand his motivations. I don't understand why he flees to Shadar Logoth. I don't really understand his death.
Yeah.
And so all those things make me, Sammael is tough. And here in particular, we end with something about his plan. And I'm like, man, I'm not sure what he means there, honestly. And so this is something I would love to hear feedback on, because this, if anything, Sammael is my white whale, right? Like, I don't understand it. I don't. Of all the characters in all the books, his motivations are the one. Like, I don't understand why he's lying. So anyway, but I'd love to get into it.
I totally agree, and unfortunately, I don't know the answer. However, I'm super intrigued, just like you are, to try and figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about it as best we can tonight, and then I'm going to be following along closely as you continue forward.
The funny thing is, as often as I read these books, and as often as I do my notes, and I think I know what I'm talking about, you'd be amazed how often the best realizations don't happen until I sit down to record the episode. Like, the really good ones usually happen, like, while we're talking about it, and I'm like, well, I don't really know. Maybe it's, oh my god. Like, that's why.
We'll see what happens.
So I want to talk first about Grendal's gown.
Yeah.
Because it looks a lot like a Teleron Riad gown.
Yeah, so it's, you pronounced it Streath?
Sure. Strife.
Yeah.
I did my best on that one. Please feel free to disagree.
Yeah, that's good enough for me. I think in my head I said Straith, but there's not a whole lot about it. I kind of looked into it when I was reading, and basically it said, it changes color with the wearer's emotions.
Mm-hmm. Like a moodstone.
Oh, like from the 70s?
From the 70s and 80s, yeah. You used to get those rings that would change color based on your hand temperature. Yeah, totally. This one's more linked directly.
Yeah, like that. And then it can also turn transparent, I guess, which seemed to be disconnected from the mood part. It was almost like a maybe even used as seduction type of a thing. I wasn't sure. It's
Right.
very, very vague.
Maybe when your mood's seductive, it turns transparent.
Yeah, she seemed to be able, Grendel in this scene seems to be able to, at will, change the transparency, but not necessarily the color, which has to do with her actual feelings.
Although she does say, as long as she controls herself, she can return it to a blue mist. So if she can control, so I see it very much like Tel'aran'rhiod, where if you're not concentrating, it will reflect your feelings, but you can control yourself,
Okay.
and then, yeah.
I totally didn't connect that to Tel'aran'rhiod at all, but that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
I almost had a moment where she talked about the gown going dead black. I was like, oh, they're meeting in Tel'aran'rhiod because the gown's changing color.
Okay.
Because that's such a and then I was like, wait, no, that's the actual cloth that's doing that, not the fact that they're in Tel'aran'rhiod.
That makes me wonder then, is the way it works connected to Tel'aran'rhiod in some way?
It's possible. To me, this just seems more like we have fan cloth, which we know is what the Warder's cloaks are made out of, and has some color changing abilities, and maybe this is related in some way.
Some kind of fancy version of it.
And then the next paragraph has a bunch of futuristic past status chamber items, things that basically like wouldn't have survived the test of time but got stuffed into a status chamber.
Right. So
Or status box, I should say.
yeah, stasis box is that?
Stasis.
Yeah.
Status. Well, no, I think is that a tomato-tomato situation? Status versus stasis?
No, it's not. So stasis is like a state of unchanging. So it's like the stasis box, basically suspends time, which is kind of a unique thing to Wheel of Time, but stasis is a concept outside of the Wheel of Time, which is, kind of an unchanging.
And I guess did I say status, that would be a US, wouldn't it?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Status. That would be my status box. Well, there's a corpse in here. We put it in there in the age of. We put a living thing in the age of. We put a living thing in there in the age of legends, and now it's dead. A stasis box will keep things alive, and I think that the golem was in this box.
I think you're right. There's only one golem that ends up in the series, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, the golem, as far as we know.
Yeah, I think because there were 6 created originally.
That's correct. 3 male and 3 female appearing, at least. They're not really male and female.
And I think, as far as I know, only one appears in the series.
Yeah, and I think they say that the rest were dead, and that one in particular was found in a stasis box. So I get the feeling that if they can die with age, just like they only last a certain amount of time, or like if they starve to death.
Yeah.
It's hard to their scene is so crazy, or they died during the War of Power. Also possible. I mean, they were invented to hunt Aes Sedai, but as we've seen, it is possible to kill them.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, I guess they dropped him through a gateway into the black space where he fell forever.
That's the one. Yeah.
So I don't know if that's really dead, but I guess eventually maybe. I don't know.
Get rid of him anyway, at least so that he's not in the world anymore. I wondered, did you ever read the article, 100 Ways to Kill a Golem?
No, I haven't read that.
It was probably a late 90s era Wheel of Time internet meme, and it was just a list of like 100 different ideas on how to kill a golem. Some of them were pretty creative, a lot of them were just funny.
Gotcha. I'm after
sort of like, there was a bunch of lists going around, and there was like the evil overlord, like 100 list rules to it be an evil overlord.
Gotcha.
Remember that? All those were going around at that time. And
yeah.
100 Ways to Kill a Murderer. Or to kill a golem, I mean.
I'm definitely going to have to look that up. I bet there's some cool stuff on that list.
And one of them was kicking it off a platform in the
okay.
ways and while skimming. Like that definitely was one of the ways that people brought up back then.
So did Sanderson take it off that list?
I doubt it. It's probably more like there was 100 fucking ways, and any way he could have come up with was already on the list.
Enough,
yeah, because we had the rules pretty much laid out. Like I don't imagine that he, or maybe it's stuck in his head. And he thought that was a good way to do it.
Yeah,
who knows?
It was a fun read.
It was. Oh God, one of the greatest map fights that Sanderson wrote by far.
Yeah.
Probably one of the best map fights.
Definitely.
So other things that were in the status box: a hollow cylinder of an exchanger.
Yeah, air conditioning.
Air conditioning, a heat exchanger.
Yeah.
I never noticed that before. That they're in, Ilion, which is supposedly hot, and he's sitting in an air-conditioned room because he has,
Right.
like, a cylinder-efficient power, one power-powered air conditioner.
Yeah, I don't think I noticed that either until this, going through it with a fine-toothed comb for the episode.
Which is funny because the bulbs I remember, the light bulbs.
I saw in the exchanger that the user has to supply power to it, so it'll run for a while after that, but it'll stop running if there's not somebody there powering it.
Oh, interesting. Where did you see that?
That was in the companion, I think.
Ah, yes, the companion. The companion, I have a love-hate relationship with the companion.
Yeah.
Because it does provide some great details like this that aren't in the book. I'm like, oh, that's really good to know. But sometimes it contradicts the book because it pulls from notes that were not necessarily used.
Right. Yeah, agreed.
And then the horrifying Zara board.
Yeah, that's creepy. I kind of imagined it as like that sort of 3D chess, except for kind of bigger, like projecting up into the air. And then, boy, it mentions that the playing pieces were once human, but what are they now? It doesn't say. I don't know. I'm not very imaginative, I guess.
I mean, I kind of imagine them being trapped in a motionless doll.
Okay.
Are you a fan of Buffy, the Vampire Slayer?
I've never watched it. I really like Joss Whedon, but I haven't watched Buffy.
Well, you're doing yourself a disservice.
Fair enough.
So in one of the very first episodes, one of the cheerleader's mom becomes a witch and switches bodies with the cheerleader. So she gets to relive high school, right? Like, sort of a silly premise.
Okay.
But it ends with her trying to switch bodies and that getting reflected into a statue. And so it ends with her, like, being stuck in a trophy statue, being like, help, I'm stuck in here, let me out. And that's exactly how I remember all these people who are part of the Zara board.
Okay.
It's just being, like, locked physically. They're in a statue, but mentally they're still there and still can think. And they're just trapped forever as part of this board.
That sounds sufficiently creepy for the dark side.
But again, that's just headcanon. I don't have any proof for that. I want to say I saw a word of rant of Jordan about exactly what the Zara board was, but I couldn't find it again before the episode.
Yeah, I didn't find that either. So I did search around a little and didn't find it. Say there's kind of an interesting art piece that's from the Age of Legends. Didn't find much about that.
Tempo of Infinity?
Yeah, Tempo of Infinity, which the name is, sort of suggestive, but it didn't seem to connect it to much.
I mean, tempo could, that's a beat. You could say that goes around. It's a bit of a wheel. Infinity, time. I mean, tempo of infinity is just another word for it's just another way of saying it's a synonym for wheel of time, really.
Yeah, I dig it.
So I think that's Jordan's little, like, inside joke, like, tempo of infinity and wheel of time. Like, the beats hit too well.
And then there's the sound sculpture music box thing that was in the read-in there.
Yeah, little MP3 player.
Yep, basically.
With some speakers. Yeah, I love these Terran. That's one of my favorite things about the Age of Legends is he just replicated our modern life with, like, little magic boxes.
Indeed.
We get an interesting line here about Jumara.
Yeah, so Jumara are the worms, right?
Yes. Well, Jumara are actually dragon-like creatures, and their larval state are the worms.
Okay. And it's kind of unclear why they can't evolve or, like, I don't know, metamorphize into the dragons anymore.
Right. Yeah, no, we don't know a lot about their life cycle. I also always kind of thought it was a homage to Dune.
Yeah, I definitely kind of caught that. I didn't think of that on this read through, but I've caught that in the past.
That he just has these things called worms, and then here's something I didn't find until I did find Tooth Comb: the kafar.
Kafar, right, which is like some kind of a nesting creature.
Right, and the only other reference I was able to find of that is that I think it's Rhodolateralga. Let me pull up the article.
It was Bashir, yeah.
Yeah. So in Gathering Storm, chapter 22, Bashir says, "There's always patrols or raids of Trollocs to fight. If not that, then something worse to scare them away. Worms or blood rasps." And so that word blood rasp comes up.
Yeah, so right. And I found an article when I was looking too that connected those possibly, but it wasn't clear.
Well, blood rasps are considered shadow spawn that nest.
Got it. Okay.
The nesting seems to be the overlap there. That the Kafar was the name of them in the Age of Legends, and then blood rasps is the name of them. The Borderlanders have named them that.
Whatever it is, it sounds awful.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine. A nest of blood-sucking shadow spawn insects.
Yeah, probably large.
Yeah, probably slightly smaller than the mosquitoes in the Midwest, but still pretty big.
Thanks, Aganor.
Oh, turns out they just de-evolved and settled in the Great Lakes. So just moving forward, he's bragging at this point. And I think most of that bragging is bullshit.
Yeah, and that kind of brings up the theme of this chapter, which I'm really trying to figure out. Okay, so is he bullshitting and like trying to come off as like really confident after his message from Rand, which was like, no, there's no truce, and he's lying and saying, yeah, there is a truce between Rand and I, and Graendal, Graendal's like totally off, but like going, oh crap, oh shit. Or did he get the wrong message and so he's actually confident?
There's a few things in here that make me think he is not actually mistaken, that he is faking. Most notably when we get his POV and he talks about that fixed grin on his face.
Okay.
This entire time when she's pushing his buttons and trying to get him to rage, he is doing everything he can to shut himself down and not go into this crazy rage.
So my question then is, how did he get so good at it suddenly? He was horrible at it in the prologue.
I do think he got a possible promise of Nabliss, because the Dark One has no problem tossing around like, would you like to be Nabliss?
Okay.
Like, we saw him do it with the Mondred. Like, who's to say he didn't say the same thing to Sammael, right? Yeah. He's throwing chaos all over the place. So I think that he did get a promise to be Nabliss. I think that's true.
I figure the Dark One probably promised everyone about that same time, all the Forsaken.
Right. With various, I'm guessing he was less upfront with Graendal because she's smarter.
Right.
But I can see him just trying to fool everybody, just be like, yeah, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with that, and that would give him a lot of confidence, and he'd be trying to step up and like, okay, I'm fulfilling this role now.
And basically, it's like, hey, do you want to live? If you live, you'll be Nabliss, and that's sort of his strategy as well. If I can just distract Rand and basically use him as the tool to take out the rest of the Forsaken, then I'll be the only one left.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. When I was reading through it, I was kind of on the other side of it. I was kind of thinking somehow he got the wrong message and suddenly he's all cocky because of it. But I think you're right.
I've thought about that long and hard, and I have a hard time he would have gotten the wrong message. Right? Rand was very clear, and his servant was compelled to die no matter what. Right? The only thing that Sammael that may have been messed up is if someone altered the weaves.
Right, and who would do that? I mean, obviously It's not Graendal, because we see from her point of view in this chapter, and she definitely didn't.
I could see maybe like Semirog, but motivation and location all doesn't seem to match.
Yeah.
That's one of those things where, unless the Dark One is fucking with him, I can't figure out who would be messing with Sammael.
I really think we would have seen that somewhere else, like a reference to it. Yeah.
Right. And so, lacking any evidence there, I have to assume that Sammael is just lying to Graendal in order to look more powerful, especially with the POV we get from him at the end, where he has to unclench his smile.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. I think you're right.
Were I you, I would be thinking about somewhere less conspicuous, somewhere he might not find me. Not a flicker of an eyelid out of him. It was as if all the strings that usually moved him had been cut. So something happened between the prologue and now.
Yeah, he got told, would thou be Nabliss?
I'm open to suggestions, guys, but that's all I can think about.
Yep. So other things that might add to that is apparently, and I don't know, I might be skipping a little ahead here, but apparently he's onto some kind of cache of Angreal, Sa'angreal, Turangreal, somewhere.
I believe that's the one in Abu Dar.
The one with the Bowl of the Winds, yep.
The one with the Bowl of the Winds. We see the girls are heading there. We get the whole thing with Millie Skane. We know that Couladin, Bors, is heading there. Not Couladin.
Caradin.
Caradin, thank you. Caradin is heading there. So we know that he is aware, probably from spies among the kin or something, that there is a source and a cache in Ebu Dar.
Yeah, and I figured that was probably the source, was the kin. I was thinking about that, and I was like, okay, wait a minute. Was he in Tel'aran'rhiod spying on Nynaeve and Elaine when they figured it out? But then he would know where it was, and he doesn't know where it is. So I would guess a source in the kin is the way.
My only pushback on that is none of the Black sisters know about the kin, right?
True.
And how big it is. And you would think if there were shadow runners, and we don't hear about any Black friends in the kin. The kin
That's
seems
true.
to be one of the only organizations that like, they were so under the radar, the Dark One didn't even notice them. Like, they managed to totally escape having Dark friends among their number, as far as I can tell. Like, to be perfectly honest, like,
Yeah.
I can't think of a single kin Dark friend.
I can't either. I mean, you'd have to go through it real carefully to make sure, but I can't either.
That combined with the fact that the Tower Black Aja Aes Sedai had no idea the true status of the kin makes me think that there was no spy.
Yeah.
But then who
Who
is telling him about...
How does
the
he
Bowl of
know? I mean, it's obvious that he does, because eventually we get the golem showing up at the same place.
Right. Which, as far as I can tell, is under his command until he dies, and then Moradin takes over.
Right. I think that's right.
And we don't believe Moradin's back yet.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Or we haven't seen him anyway.
The other thing that comes up, and I think it's in one of the couple of previous chapters, is one of those, I think, is it the Wise Ones, or maybe it's Egwene, has a dream about the, Nynaeve and Elaine going for the Bowl of the Winds, and if they get it, then good things happen, and if they don't, then disaster. Because the dark side will get it.
Right. And I think Sammael was that other side.
Exactly.
And he would have had just been able to decimate Rand at that point.
Right, and completely destroy the weather as well.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Or just prevent the Wise Ones from fixing it.
Yeah, prevent them from fixing it. Also keep Nynaeve from getting her perilous net, or whatever that thing's called.
Right. And the Bowl of the Winds was key in the last battle as well. Like, there was no way they would have been able to survive Shogul without the Bowl of the Winds.
Right, and also that weird dagger thing that hides them, and yeah, there's a bunch of stuff in there.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, no, a bunch of stuff in that. And that's where they said the treasure, almost as great as the Bowl of the Winds, would be right next to it. So he basically says, I have a truce. I've agreed not to aid on any other chosen, and it's, as far as I can tell, just a lie so he could get out of being threatened,
I mean, it seems like his little relationship with Graendal is not going very well. He wants out.
Yeah, or at least to be the dominant player. He wants to be the guy in charge and have her cooperation.
Now, if I remember right, she was setting him up anyway, right? Like, her and the other ones were going to send Rand to kill Sammael. Is that right?
Yeah, or Sammael to kill Rand.
Okay, yeah, kind of putting them against each other one-on-one.
Exactly, yeah. And she was kind of hoping that in the beginning, she's like, I pointed him at Rand like a gun. I bet he didn't even know how well he was played. So again, something has to happen to change his mind. He went for peace rather than that. So I just trying to think what could have happened in the first half of this book to change his mind so much.
Yeah, I thought about it quite a bit when I was reading through this, and I didn't come up with anything. And your idea there is better than anything I had. So
that he went to the pit of Shogul and was told, will you be nameless?
Right. When he said that in here, I sort of blew it off. I was like, oh, he's just making that up. But I think you're right. I mean, because we see Demander get that same thing, and that just explains his confidence so well, because he just didn't have any at the beginning of this book.
No, none. No, and the idea of a truce with Rand, like, that was not where he was headed in the prologue.
No, not at all. I mean, I guess the other thing, and Graendal mentions this, is he's got a huge army coming at him, so...
Although he claims that they're not coming at him, and the reality is they're not coming at him. Rand has no intention of sending that army at him. Any idea why he's trying to track down the other Forsaken?
Well, I think your idea that he thinks he might be Niblis falls in line with that. He wants to know where they are if he's going to be the head honcho.
Right. Maybe he could make peace with Rand if he could turn somebody else over?
Yeah, maybe, or maybe just to keep tabs on what they're doing. Maybe he wants to feel like he's in control. So, he mentions all those different Forsaken. I kind of thought through where they're all at right about now.
You got Semirog, who we knows with Shan Chan.
Yeah, with Tuon. And also kind of back and forth, right? So she's with Tuon, but she's also has just recently set up Halima's backstory.
Right. Although I think that was at the urging of Shadowhuron.
Yeah, okay, so Shadowhuron kind of snatched her and said, hey, set this up. And then she probably just went right back after that.
That's my assumption, yeah. Because she was good at torture, so they wanted the full story out of the captured Aes Sedai.
Yeah.
I don't remember her name. But the one who gets tortured and killed, and all that information gets handed over to Halima.
And then Masana is in the White Tower as Danelle.
Right.
Asmodean is dead, and Graendal killed him, which
right.
is funny because they're talking about him, and she doesn't say anything, of course.
Well, there is this quote here where she says, Asmodean and Lanfear are dead. I am sure Moghedien must be too. She says Asmodean and Lanfear are dead with absolute certainty.
True.
And that's often, because she's the only one who's certain, like, that Asmodean is dead, that was for a long time used as evidence, or at least an argument that she was the one who killed Asmodean, because she's one of the only people who insists that he's dead. And as far as we can tell, that's true.
Yeah, that is right. And I don't know, it was part of Jordan saying, it's obvious if you just read the books.
Yeah. Oh, you son of a bitch. But, I will say that in all the theories in the time, Graendal was one of the top contenders. It was just she'd barely been in the books, so having her kill a major character seemed a little out of place. Yeah. But then, you have the prologue and then this chapter, which gives her a lot of personality and a lot of screen time.
Man, I remember back in the late 90s spending hours on the internet on some of those sites like Theoryland.
Oh, yeah.
Combing through people's thoughts about who had killed Asmodean and just never, ever getting to any conclusion.
The Wheel of Time FAQ, the WattFac, was my go-to website. I spent a lot of time reading the Who Killed Asmodean theories on there. And it broke it all down. Because I think it took the stuff from Theoryland and put it in a more readable format.
Okay.
But I think a lot of the source was Theoryland. Someone old school can correct me on that.
Yeah, and boy, I was eating it up back then, but that was one I never figured out until it was like officially revealed who killed it. I didn't know.
Again, the WattFac had Graendal as one of the two prime suspects.
Yeah.
So I thought it was a good chance it was her. Lanfear was the favorite. I think was the other one that I really favored. And I was like, well, maybe she used her wish to get out and kill Asmodean for revenge, and then was sucked back in. That was always sort of the theory that I held for a long time.
Gotcha.
Is that, like, he would have known who she was, he would have known that she was coming after him, and she had reason to kill him, and the whole, like, her popping out, killing him, and then disappearing would have really worked with a wish from the snakes and the foxes.
Yeah, true. I don't remember reading that one, but that's a good one. Yep.
And a lot of people, of course, favored the Tamandred theory.
Right, yeah. Boy, there were some well thought out threads on there that were all kinds of different characters.
No, and in a lot of ways, I think that a lot of people hold on to the Tamandred theory because they want Tamandred to be the one who killed Asmodean. And I do believe those theories are inherently linked.
Yeah, very much so. And I mean, it just seems so, like he shows up about the same time and...
She is certain he is dead. She's wrong about Lanfear, kind of.
Right, yeah. She seems pretty sure that Lanfear is dead too, which eventually Lanfear does die, but at this point she's still alive, technically.
Technically, she's in Sid Hall being tortured by the snakes and the foxes.
Yeah, sort of eaten.
Yeah. And that doesn't change until Morden basically goes in there, kills her, and leaves. And then the Dark Lord resurrects her as Sindane. But that's how he frees her. He kills her.
Yeah, that'd be a pretty interesting scene to see on screen.
Yeah, it's definitely off screen. But that's one thing. A great potential of the TV show is to show things like that on screen.
And then the last one is Moghedien, who's on a leash.
Yeah, in Salidar.
Yep. Oh, wait, we skipped Demandred. Demandred's in Shara.
And he says, I know what Demandred is scheming, but where is he hiding? And one of the things Sammael is wrong about is he thinks Demandred is in the south.
Yeah, right. He seems really sure that he's somebody else.
And so I think Sammael's just wrong. An unreliable narrator type situation.
The interesting thing is, so there's a mention in one of the recent chapters, or maybe it's one of the next ones coming up, about this rumor comes. Oh, maybe it's the next chapter. Yeah. This rumor comes that there's some kind of chaos going on in Shara. And so that's Demandred.
Right. Well, we saw in the prologue that Graendal had kidnapped the Shaboa and the Shaboan.
Right.
Which are the leaders. So it would have taken some time for that news to get to the Westlands. But I assume the chaos is started by Graendal, but Demandred is taking advantage of it and taking over. In the same way that Semirog, she slaughtered the Shanchan nobility and started chaos over there.
No, I kind of thought that Demandred and Graendal worked together on setting Demandred up over there.
I would assume they're working together on that.
And boy, I think that was about all I really had till the end of the chapter there.
Yeah, just where she says, I do not know where Demandred or Semirog is. I think she's lying about Demandred.
For sure.
And so Demandred tells her, find the rest, and then we see just a short paragraph from his POV, and I'm just going to read that whole thing. When Graendal was gone, the gateway back to her palace in Eredomon closed. Sammael let the smile dissolve on his face. His jaws ached from holding it. Graendal thought too much. She was so used to making others act for her that she failed to think of acting for herself. He wondered what she would say if she ever discovered that he had manipulated her as deftly as she had manipulated so many fools in her time. He would wager everything that she never saw his real purpose. So Masana was inside the White Tower. Masana in the tower and Graendal in Eredomon. Had Graendal been able to see his face then, she would have known real fear. Whatever happened, Sammael intended to be the one still standing on the day of return. To be named Nabliss and defeat the Dragon Reborn.
Yeah, so that kind of backs up what you were saying, because he's showing his fear now that she's gone.
And saying he was able to manipulate her, basically, into what he wanted.
Right. He says as deftly as she had manipulated anyone else, including himself earlier in this book.
Exactly. So something appeared, clued him in, and he figured out, basically. And if he's manipulating her, well, he's manipulating her into thinking he has a truce with Rand, which he doesn't. Because that's the only thing he really manipulated her into thinking or doing. Right.
Oh, and also that he's on to that cache.
Oh, I think he is.
Which he really is, but he let that drop, and then alongside all the cool stuff he's got hanging out in his hall there, it's kind of like, look what I found, and I'm going to find some more here soon.
You know what else may have really changed his mind? Finding the stasis box.
Mm.
Having a golem, having all this stuff. Like, who knows, maybe he did find an Angreal.
Yeah, and, a golem, I'm not sure exactly how he's able to control it, but very powerful ally.
Yeah, and he's got it hunting in Abu Dar pretty quickly, I think, after this.
Yeah, I guess I'd have to refresh my timeline there, but at some point it shows up and kills Herod Fell.
Yeah, that's coming up soon, because we've already had the discussion about the wheel. So he might actually be here in Cairhien. Well, Cairhien in the next chapter, here.
Right.
Because we go to Cairhien, and that's...
Yeah,
where does Herod Fell die?
That makes me wonder, how does Sammael know about Herod Fell? That always felt...
Oh, I think he's got a bunch of spies near Rand.
Yeah, true. I mean, he's been involved in Cairhien before. It always felt like a Moradin-style thing, though, killing Herod Fell. But Moradin's not around yet, so...
No.
Yeah.
And being, as Sammael has the stasis box, we got to assume that it's his orders. Okay, so he is killed in the epilogue of Lord of Chaos.
Okay. Yeah, so definitely sounds like Sammael's orders.
And that, as far as we can tell, is our first sort of on-screen appearance of the Golem. And then he, in the beginning of A Crown of Swords, tells Caridin he's going to send someone to help him against the Aes Sedai. And that someone, the assumption is the Golem.
Gotcha. I don't think I ever picked up on that one.
The Encyclopedia Watt is a great source as well.
Yeah, and I look stuff up on all these different sites you've mentioned, but I've never gone through them in any kind of thorough way.
Oh, it's a lot of fun, I'll tell you what.
I bet.
You learn a lot doing that. Because you're like, oh my god. Because people, I'm doing this in podcast format, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, but like, a lot of the information I'm presenting has been figured out by other people, and I've just read it on other websites, and I've compiled it in my own head, or I'm compiling it live on the podcast, Every once in a while I come out with a theory of my own that's good, but half my theories are crap. It's mostly the good information I've read on all the various other fan sites that I enjoy talking about.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure a good portion of my theories that feel like my own were something I read on a forum in the 90s.
Yeah, no, I owe a lot to all the various websites out there doing their part to compile and cross-reference all the information in these books. I don't know if the podcast would be possible without them. So,
yeah, for sure.
Huge shout out to all those pages. We are recording this episode slightly out of order just because SpoilerCon jumped in and we had already pre-scheduled this one. So I'm going to record the previous 2 chapters after we're done here. So just so folks know that we're slightly out of order. But we just finished up SpoilerCon, and I wanted to ask you. You said you were having a great time there, so I was hoping you could expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I really enjoyed all of the events. I didn't make it to every single one because, that's part of the reason why I wish it was in person, so I could completely immerse. Being at home, I had like things that popped up and I had to leave to go do this or that. But loved the Kate and Michael Kramer panel. That was amazing. My favorite was the trivia. So I participated in one of the trivia sessions, and I had an excellent time with that.
Did you spectate any of them, or did you just participate in the one? Yep.
So, man, the setup on that was amazing. That's DT, I guess. I didn't really know him before this, but
he's the Canadian, just nicest man who he set up a whole trivia server, and he's been running it since the beginning of quarantine.
Okay.
And it started Wheel of Time, and it's expanded out a little bit from there. But it became such a popular thing, and he's done it and rehearsed it and gotten so good at running trivia on Discord over there that when he ported it over to what we were doing, it just ran. Yeah, it's Wheel of Time trivia, pub trivia, and a couple of other games. And he ran it so smooth. And in a lot of ways, I think the trivia server was practice for SpoilerCon, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah.
He started that to kind of get ready, and then it took off and became its own thing, although I may be exaggerating that a little bit.
Boy, it was awesome. Yeah, I did. So I spectated. Actually, I sat and listened to your team on the content creator one.
Oh, nice.
Through the whole thing, and that was really fun. And then after that, I was like, okay, I've got to participate. So I jumped into the afternoon one the next day. So.
Yeah, and again, I wish I could have jumped into some of the spectator ones, but I was doing the streams and stuff, so I couldn't be in 2 places at once. So that's. Right. Unfortunately, I can go back and rewatch them. You can go back and rewatch them. You can go to if you registered, the day 1 and day 2 links will actually let you see everything that happened day 1 and day 2. And I'm currently editing those videos, and we'll hopefully have them up publicly for folks to see within a week to 10 days. So you should be able to go see those publicly if you're listening right now.
I've already been digging through them a little bit, trying to catch some of the things I missed.
I wanted you to bring up your favorite because I can talk about. There was the Variant on Trial. There was the all sorts of fun things. But yeah, I have to admit I did kind of like winning the contest. Well, we won all 3 rounds of the content creator trivia contest, and then I got outplayed in the bidding on the final round, and Aradia beat me. So
yeah, that final Jeopardy got you guys.
Nobody got it right, and so the play was all in the bidding, and we lost. We got second place by 1 point. But we won we got more points than anyone else in each of the 3 trivia rounds. So I consider that winning.
It was a wild ride.
And you can't tell me otherwise.
Yeah, we kind of felt like we won also, even though we lost.
Hey, and that's the sign of a good trivia game,
Indeed.
Yeah. But man, that first round was all numbers. Like, that is my shit. Like, I might not be able to pull a name out of my ass, but you ask me, like, how many warders somebody has, I'll be like, oh yeah, that was 7. Like, I don't know why, but numbers, well, I was a math teacher. Numbers stick in my head. So we dominated the numbers round, which was a nice start.
Yeah, I kind of liked the way the different rounds had those kind of different themes.
Yeah, he did a really good job with it. And Iradian Kelsey wrote the questions for day 2, by the way. So
that's what I was going to say. I was going to say thank you to the people. I knew Aradia. I didn't know who else had written the questions, but I really enjoyed them. And I gave Aradia kind of a hard time about one of the questions, but it was all in good fun.
Oh, what question? Let me know.
It was about Broken Earth. So on your recommendation earlier on the podcast, I started Broken Earth and loved it. And actually, awesome. I just did a book club on with my book club on the 5th season, and everybody gave that great reviews in the book club. So that was pretty awesome. But
did you just see N.K. Jemisin won a? I was going to say Arthur C. Clarke Award, but that's not right.
MacArthur Grant.
MacArthur Grant. Thank you.
Yes. I did. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I've only read the Broken Earth trilogy so far, so I'm looking forward to The City We Became as the next one I'm going to do. But
definitely. And some of her older work is good, but I think that she really achieved a new level when she evolved as an author to Broken Earth, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's a step above her previous work. Not that her previous work isn't good. It's just, when you can see when someone like finds their voice, their characters come together, the ideas sync, and it's all well edited, and all of a sudden you have potential becomes reality.
Yeah, boy, I agree with that on Broken Earth. It really came together for me. But you know what? Just like the Wheel of Time back in the 90s, I had a hard time getting started on it. It took me a couple times to get through the 5th season the first time.
The second person perspective is very, very difficult, even though it exists for a reason. Yeah.
Yeah, at first I kind of liked it, and then I kind of didn't like it, and in the end I ended up liking it. But it was a little hard at first.
Oh yeah, without a doubt, a doubt. But I think someone today was posting how they didn't understand the prologue of Eye of the World, and it sort of made me think, these what fantasy authors like to do is give you a murder mystery in the beginning, right? Like, they give you this scene that you don't understand because there's so much going on in the background, and it's a mystery, and you have to read the rest of the book to solve the mystery. And I think if you think of it that way, you enjoy these sort of maybe non sequitur prequels a little bit more, because you can look at it and be like, oh, that's a puzzle I need to solve, instead of, what the fuck is going on? This doesn't make any sense.
Right. Which, I mean, honestly, when I started Wheel of Time, that's exactly what I said when I read the prologue. What the fuck is this? But it was intriguing. I was like, okay, what is going on here? And then you start reading the regular part of the series, chapter 1, and it's like a whole different thing. What is this?
I feel like it wasn't unknown in the day. I feel like I'd read a lot of other prologues like that it didn't surprise me, but maybe I'm just looking back in hindsight and being like, oh yeah, that was obvious, because now everybody does that now. So I'm not sure which one, whether I'm confirmation biasing that one or not.
Gotcha. Yeah, it was certainly the first one like that for me, but it was also my first fantasy series besides Lord of the Rings.
Mm.
So before that, I had mostly read sci-fi, like more hard sci-fi, and just other sort of fiction. So,
in fairness, Lord of the Rings has a whole book as a prequel, or a prologue. It's like, oh yeah, this is where that ring came from, by the way.
Yeah. So I'm reading The Wheel of Time to my son now as a follow-up to having read The Hobbit to him.
Nice.
And we just started The Great Hunt, I don't know, like maybe 3 or 4 days ago. And so I had just read a scene out of The Great Hunt to him to put him to bed. Then I jumped on to do my trivia. And one of the questions was out of the scene we had just read.
So how old's your son?
My son's 11. And, I went back and forth what age to start him on, because I love these books so much. I didn't want to start him too early or wait too long. And I didn't really want him to read it himself, because he's a good reader, but he didn't, I don't really see him taking on something this size at the same age I did. So I was like, I think I want to read it to him because I just love reading it also. So
Sure. Well, I can understand that one.
and we had done. I read to him every night, so we had done all of Harry Potter except for the final book. I felt like it was a little bit too mature for him yet. He was probably 9 when we finished that up, so I wanted to wait a few years. So then we started on The Hobbit, and we did a few other things, and now doing the Wheel of Time. So that'll take up plenty of years.
Yeah, it will. And I think the first 3 books are a little more consumable. Maybe read them the first trilogy, and see it goes from there. Maybe jump back to something. Maybe finish up the Harry Potter series at that point.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. I finished The Eye of the World, and throughout it, he was kind of like, I don't know if I like this. I don't know if I like this. And then we read the final page, and he was like, can you go get the next book right now?
Nice.
And I said, well, I don't have to. The first chapter of the next book is at the end of this one.
Oh, I love it when they do that.
Yeah.
They used to get me so many times when I was a kid.
Yep.
Although I will say it did confuse me as to whether or not I had bought books before, because I'd constantly turn to the beginning of a book and read it and be like, oh yeah, I've read this chapter, I have this book, and then realize I'd read it at the end of a different book.
Ah, right.
So that would throw me off. And then I'd end up buying duplicates or something.
That happened to me all the time with the Wheel of Time. I have probably like 4 or 5 of each one on my bookshelf right now.
I cannot hang on to my Eye of the Worlds. I keep giving them away to people.
Ah, yeah.
I've got everything else, but I cannot keep an Eye of the World with me, because the second I meet somebody, I'm like, hey, how are you? Do you want an Eye of the World? Like, my name's John. Man, I'll meet people in a bar and just, well, not anymore, but I used to meet people in bars and just be like, oh, you like fantasy? Have you read Eye of the World? Oh, I've got a copy here. Can I interest you?
I'm not quite as I'm not quite as
evangelistic,
zealous as you, but I've definitely lent out / given away a ton of them. And actually, when they announced the show, I just went to the bookstore and bought like 5 to have on hand.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Just buy in bulk.
Yep.
Jason Denzel tells a story about how when he started Dragonmount, he wrote to Tor and was like, can I just get a box of Eye of the Worlds? And they just sent him or get a couple of copies of Eye of the World to send out. They sent him a big box of it. And he's like, I was giving them out for like 10 years before I got rid of them all. And I was like, maybe I should do that.
It's a good idea, but they're not that expensive. I just went and bought a few. Oh, so you asked me a while ago, and I didn't get to this part, how I started the podcast. And I just kind of wanted to tell this because it's been an amazing journey for me.
Please, yeah, I'd love to hear that.
So I had actually, I don't know, maybe a year before I found the podcast, maybe 2, I can't remember. I had stumbled upon a blog on Tor.com that's done by Silas Barrett or something like that, who is reading the series for the first time and writing an article about every couple of chapters once a week. And I was just really enjoying reading that. And so I'd come back once a week to check on that. And then one day there was a post that was like, you might enjoy these Wheel of Time podcasts. And I was like, oh, Wheel of Time podcast, that's a cool idea. Why didn't I think of that? But then I thought, oh, I should check some of these out. So I was reading through, let's see, do any of these sound good? And Wheel of Time spoilers was not in the list. However, in the comments below, like every single comment was like, why didn't you guys put in Wheel of Time spoilers? Your list is no good. You should have put Wheel of Time spoilers in.
I remember that article, and I remember reading it and being like, oh, they didn't include me. And then like scrolling down and seeing all the comments and be like, oh my God, this is going to be amazing.
It was.
And we gained a lot of listeners that day. We really did.
One of them was me. And the funny thing is I didn't even check out any of the other ones. I was like, oh, all these commenters are after this podcast. It must be the best one. And so here I am. And then, of course, I had the binge, which was amazing.
Yeah, at that point, there was a fair amount.
Yeah, boy, I don't know exactly. I can't remember, but I think you were in the beginning of the Fires of Heaven.
Sure.
The binge was amazing, and I was actually training for a half marathon at the time, so I was listening while I would run. Patrick, being on at the time, was on and off talking about his running, so that also kind of got me a little bit more hooked into listening. But yeah, I just listened to it every time I'd go on a run for a long time there and just binged. And when I ran out, it was a sad day.
Well, you know what they say, the re-binge.
Indeed. I haven't done that yet, but I'm sure I will eventually.
I have not gone back and listened to any of the early episodes, really. I obviously I listen to them when we record them and when I edit them and oftentimes right after they come out. But what I haven't done is gone back and, like, listened to the early ones. Just because they're either going to be, I think I've said this before, but they're either going to be good, and I'm going to be like, oh, man, I wish I had gotten better. Or they're going to be terrible, and I'm going to be like, oh, man, those were terrible.
Well, let me tell you, they're not terrible, but you have come a long way. Yeah, I've really seen the improvement over the time.
Thank you.
Both in, like, your ability to analyze and talk about the book, but also just in the quality of the actual sound and all that kind of stuff.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or
support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?